How many have ever heard, boy, a dollar's not what it used to be? Well, you know what? It's not. I know a lot of people in my generation remember nickel candy bars, 10-cent comic books, a 10-cent Coke, local calls for a dime. Is that the case anymore? Not hardly. What's the culprit? Inflation. Now, I'm not going to get deep into what causes inflation so much, which is basically a way for governments to pay back debts at less dollars than they borrowed. We're going to talk today about the impact inflation has on your retirement.
Welcome to the Ask Brad Show. Be prepared to hear ideas, concepts, and strategies that may challenge the way you were taught to think about saving and investing for retirement. It's time to roll up our sleeves and get to it. And now, the host of the Ask Brad Show, here's Brad Williams.
I appreciate you listening to the Ask Brad Show. And today, we're going to highlight a topic everybody is familiar with. And no matter what age group you're in, it's called inflation. Now, you got two choices with inflation. You can ignore it, hope it goes away, or you can adapt to it. And I might say it's probably a better idea to adapt to it, because it's pretty much like air. You got to have it. You got to breathe it. It's around us all the time, so you better learn to deal with it. So we're going to talk, like I said, about inflation, and we're going to break into four specific things about inflation. What the stated inflation rate is over history, that's number one. What's the real inflation rate? That's number two. And why is there a difference? And then finally, things you can do to protect yourself against it. Now, you got to think to yourself, why do I protect myself against it? Well, in retirement, it's the difference between you running out of money before you run out of life or having money left over at the end of your life. Because if you don't protect it, inflation can eat up everything you have. And, you know, I'm kind of a numbers guy, so why don't we go through that? You know, some statistics. And this was kind of interesting. Doesn't surprise me with modern technology, with medicine, is that if you hit 65, a couple both hitting 65, you got a 50-50 chance you're going to live to 92. Now, a lot of the mortality statistics you see are related to at birth, but they change once you hit certain ages like 65. You know, if you've gotten to 65 and you're pretty good health, then the chances making the 80s and 90s are pretty good. In fact, when you think about that, I remember my grandfather was 86. He retired at 55. And he lived 31 years in retirement. So, you know, think about that. Think about planning for 30 years plus in retirement. You know, back when I graduated from high school in 1975, I'm 61 now. And we think about life expectancy then, it's made an increase since then. So I know when Social Security first came out, life expectancy was a lot less, and the first age you could get it was 65. And there was a reason for that. So when we think about 25 or 30-year retirement, and you know, it's great that modern medicine helps us get through this, because a lot of chronic illnesses and issues can be manageable where you can actually have a pretty decent life. Now, the other side of that is that even when your body's just about worn out, oftentimes medical science can keep you going when in the past you weren't. So we go back, you know, 1980, a postage stamp was 15 cents. Now it's 55. So it's pretty much tripled over that time. So you got to be thinking about, am I going to need 2 to 3 times as much money or income at the end of retirement as at the beginning? And I'd say, well, that's a good way to look at it. Let's think about that. 2 to 3 times the income 30 years from now if you're retiring today. And that's not even counting in healthcare costs. I've done shows on long-term care and things like that. I'm just talking about income and inflation and keeping up your standard of living. When you think about people that you've known, there's those that appear to have money, there's those that have money, and there's those who have money and appear to have money. And I know we've all seen people, and I've seen some clients who live to be ripe old ages, and then toward the end started eating into that nest egg to pay for, for example, Alzheimer's. That's probably one of the biggest fears. And people who have been executors for estates, and they've seen before their uncle got sick how much money they had, and then after a lot of health care costs, how little they had left, and what inflation outside of that had done for them. So I guess my point is you better plan on having more money. You got to be thinking about having more money. 2 to 3 times. Think about that. 2 to 3 times. Now, what I'd like to do is, I like giving out information. I'm all about sharing knowledge. I'd like to give away a report because it's all about income in retirement. It's called The Universe of Non-Stock Market Income Generating Alternatives. And let me repeat that. It's a commission report titled The Universe of Non-Stock Market Income Generating Alternatives. And this will help plan for that income problem. This will help you make sure you don't live out your money. It's good information, and we'd love to give it to everyone who calls, 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. And so give us a call, and we'll give that to you.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, we believe in innovative thinking, and we're not afraid to challenge conventional methods in our approach to managing, investing, and preserving wealth. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
Investing in the stock market these days is like riding a roller coaster. Leaving a place of safety, get on the coaster, hear the clickety-clack as you experience anticipation climbing to the top of the hill, followed by sheer panic as you plummet back to the earth, hoping you stay on track. You might be brave enough to repeat the process several times, going up and down, but never achieving higher highs and accomplishing nothing but anticipation followed by fear. The stock market has been doing this same ride of volatility with no real growth. Proper education, though, can help you find a better way to grow your money during these times.
Call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
Welcome back. We're talking today about inflation. And if you're just tuning in now, we're talking about how it affects you. Retirement's an interesting thing. It's not just a big phase of 30 years of fun and games. You know, the golden years, when you think about what those can mean to you, I guess the average age of my clients is probably 70, 72. Although I do have clients in their 90s and in their 50s. And it seems like I'm getting some younger ones. I think more and more people are starting to think about this earlier than when they decide to get the gold watch and walk out the door. So in my 32 years of experience, I've really learned a lot from experience about aging. And I can say one thing. When I leave this business, when I retire, of course, they'll probably take me out of my office feet first. If you listen to my wife, I love what I do so much. I will be wiser by quite a bit than when I got in. And what I mean by that is wiser in what aging actually does your body, to what it does to your income and health and all the aspects of that. So, when you think about retirement, it comes in phases. And I had a cohort of mine share this with me, and I love it. I use it all the time. He says, you got the go-go years. That usually goes to you're about 75. That's when you're really excited about retirement. You're hitting all those places that you've always wanted to go. You're going to see the kids all the time, the grandkids. And, you're popping out for this weekend and this cruise and that. We call that the go-go years. And then from, say, 75 to 80, 85, and you kind of go in the slow-go years where, you're not as energetic, and maybe you've traveled out. You don't mind going to see the kids and the grandkids, but the cruises and things like that are less frequent, and you don't really want to take the 13-hour flight from New York to New Zealand. And it's just not entertaining thought anymore to have long trips like that. So that's when you start into those slow go years. Now, when you think about that, what causes you to go from go-go to slow-go? Age. And then, of course, you hit, after the slow-go years, the no-go years. So you got go-go, slow-go to no-go. And what happens when you're in that no-go? Well, that's when health is such an issue that you really don't like traveling that much. You may not even be getting out of the house that much. And the key is your life's changed. Your expenses have probably gone up because you got more health care costs. So you're taking your minimum distributions. If anybody's ever looked at a minimum distribution chart, you can see what that means, because it's, that graph is gone up. And then all of a sudden the market tumbles when you're taking your required minimum distributions. And, that advisor says, oh, hang in there. It'll come back. You ever heard that before? Last thing you do is want to sell. Ride it out. Market always goes up. Over the long haul, it always goes up. Well, you got to also look at what is the long haul. What is the long haul? Long haul at age 30 is one thing. Long haul at 72 is another. So it's all perspective of how much time, because investing is all about risk and time. The more time you got, the more risk you can take. So when you think about it, and you got 30, 35 years in retirement and maybe 10 to 15 good years in retirement, and the rest, you've moved into the slow go and the no go. One thing I encourage my clients to do is, when they've got the income coming in, when they're healthy, go do the trips, because there will come a time when you're not going to want to do that. But the key is you also don't want to worry about burning up all your money. So what I talked about was stated inflation rate. Well, right now, government tells us it's about 3%. So I said number 2 when we started was real inflation rate. Now, you think the government tells us it's 3, and before I go into some actual statistics about the government telling you one thing and it actually being another, imagine that, government telling us one thing and it actually being another. There's the Hoover Dam analogy. I don't know how many have been to Las Vegas, and even if you enjoy the casinos, you probably want to get out and travel. It's beautiful country out there, totally different than the East Coast. But a lot of people take that Hoover Dam tour, which is a miracle. It's one of those times when people are so energetic and enthusiastic about working that a government project actually was finished before schedule, early. But let me ask you this: when you go there, if you want to get a smirk out of the tour guide right before you get started, just tell him you want to take the damn tour and see what he says. He's probably heard that a million times. So my wife tells me my jokes are corny, and I just have to admit they are. So several interesting things you find on the dam tour. So you think about that. 95 men died building the dam. If you were injured and then went somewhere else, hospital or whatever, that died, then you weren't counted in that statistic. And there were about 300 of them. So that's about 3 to 1. So why is that statistic skewed like that? Why don't they just say 300 men died building the dam? Well, because they had to get the dam built. And this was the 30s. Times were tough. The government created a number that had some truth in it, but not the whole truth. That's why I say when they tell you it's 3, you might think it might be a little more than that. Now, before we go to break, I want to make an offer to you. A friend of mine wrote a book, Jeffrey Small. It's a great book, and it addresses some of these issues. It's called Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up. And I want to give that book to the first 3 callers who call in at 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Give us a call. We'll tell you how to get the book. We'll get it out to you. Just remember, 844-343-6048.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, we understand the struggles that families and business owners face today. We want to help you develop, implement, and monitor a strategy that's designed to address your personal objectives and individual situation. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
This is Brad Williams, and I have been privileged to have been an instructor over the last 12 years or so at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. They have some great course offerings. I'm currently teaching a course that I've written and taught for many years, Changing Face of Retirement in the 21st Century. But that's not all of the courses there. You can learn languages. You can learn hobbies, travel. There are so many things that you can get out of these courses they offer at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. So check it out today and come keep your brain working.
For more information on the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, call 256-824-6183. That's 256-824-6183. Or email olli.info@uah.edu. The Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. Come keep your brain working. Thanks for listening to our show today. In retirement, you only get one chance to get it right, and we know that proper information leads to informed decisions. And that's why we hold free informational workshops in our area every month. Topics like Social Security, RMDs, the latest retirement tax strategies, IRAs, estate planning, and so much more. For dates and times of the next free workshop in your area, just pick up the phone. Give us a call today. 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Or visit us online at askbradshow.com. That's askbradshow.com.
Welcome back. We're talking today about inflation. And if you're just tuning in now, we're talking about how it affects you. Retirement's an interesting thing. It's not just a big phase of 30 years of fun and games. You know, the golden years, when you think about what those can mean to you, I guess the average age of my clients is probably 70, 72. Although I do have clients in their 90s and in their 50s. And it seems like I'm getting some younger ones. I think more and more people are starting to think about this earlier than when they decide to get the gold watch and walk out the door. Now, as I mentioned, point 2, what's a real inflation rate? Well, we also have to look at what we're spending our money on. So, for example, a younger person, they're spending a lot of money on their home. They're paying their mortgage off. Well, that's a fixed cost. Unless they're one of these that refinance every 5 years and get the cash out like they tell you to do on TV. Not always a smart thing to do. So a lot of this is things that don't change, you know. But when you think about food, clothes, cost of medical care, cost of fuel, all these things inflate. And it's different for retirees because of what they're spending their money on. You've also got to think about the fact that you don't have kids, you probably don't have a mortgage, so a lot of the tax deductions that you had when you were working are gone. So when you got at age 70, things are inflating at a much higher rate for you than they are for a younger person. So if you were to Google what the number one fear is of today in retirement, it's not death. It used to be running out of money. It appears that it's now rising cost of health care. I would say that probably rising cost of health care and running out of money go to the same. So, like any study, I think it's all how the questions are asked. So remember this, when you're talking about inflation, there's a big difference in the number the government counts and the number we count. There's, for example, when I was taking my securities exams, when I first got in the business and you're doing all these hypotheticals and they're throwing all these questions at you, some pretty grueling exams, I might add. But most of your instructors, I always made a habit of going to one of those pre-class or pre-test classes just to make sure I was up on everything. And they'll tell you, there's the test world and there's the real world. Well, there's the government world and then there's the real world. What real inflation is and what the government tells us it is. And I think one of my big goals in the shows I do is to share the information I've learned in all these years of experience and really pull the curtain back on retirement planning and try to share information with the public on the real ins and outs of it. So I'd like to go again and talk about Jeff Small, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up, because I really, really love this book. And this is like a $20, $25 value that I'm giving out to the first three callers for no cost, no obligation. 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. A lot of the things I talk about, Jeff covers in his book, and I just think he does a great job.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, our goal is to develop enduring, long-term personal relationships with our clients, knowing that you have placed your trust in our expertise and dedication. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
Investing in the stock market these days is like riding a roller coaster. Leaving a place of safety, get on the coaster, hear the clickety-clack as you experience anticipation climbing to the top of the hill, followed by sheer panic as you plummet back to the earth, hoping you stay on track. You might be brave enough to repeat the process several times, going up and down, but never achieving higher highs and accomplishing nothing but anticipation followed by fear. The stock market has been doing this same ride of volatility with no real growth. Proper education, though, can help you find a better way to grow your money during these times.
Call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. If you've missed any of today's program or you'd need more information, we're here for you 24/7 online. Visit AskBradShow.com. That's AskBradShow.com.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, we've been talking about inflation, stated inflation rate that the government gives us, and the real inflation rate. One of the key things is you got to hedge against it. If you want to hedge against inflation, you got to get investments that stay ahead of inflation. So if inflation is at 3 or 4, You need something that's paying 5 or 6 to stay ahead of it. And then you can take the difference and reinvest it. What could you possibly reinvest it in to get those kind of returns? Well, earlier I was talking about a commission report that I'd like to offer all our listeners, the universe of non-stock market income generating alternatives. And again, you want that. That's something we can email to you. No cost, no obligation. Real heads up commission report, 844-343-6048. It's 844-343-6048. Now, let me give you an example. There are good corporate bonds out there that can pay over 5%. And that's an interesting thing. You're going to hear me say that that's a good thing and go back to your advisor and say, hey, I was listening to this guy on the radio and he was talking about corporate bonds, and he's going to say, oh, yeah, he's talking about high yield bonds, the risky ones. Bonds don't pay that. Well, if he says that, you need to question it, because there are some things called preferred stocks that do just that. And I talk about those in the commission report, the universe of non-stock market income generating alternatives. And that's something you need to educate yourself on. But let's go a little further, and let's talk about the real world, because I told you what the government world was and what their inflation rate is in the real world. Let's go back in time, and everybody can put their own examples and their own experiences in here. Price of a car in 1960 was about $2,600. Isn't that hard to believe? So, think about that. In 1970, which was just a few years after that, it had gone up to $9,400. That's 261% increase. That's not 3% a year, folks. That was when the government was saying inflation was 1.6. Now, why does the government live in their world and we live in the real world? Well, they base their inflation on the CPI index. And I'm not going to go into a long, drawn-out description of that and how they come up with it. So I'd like to go again and talk about Jeff Small, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up, because I really, really love this book. And this is like a $20, $25 value that I'm giving out to the first 3 callers for no cost, no obligation. 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. A lot of the things I talk about, Jeff covers in his book, and I just think he does a great job.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, we believe in innovative thinking, and we're not afraid to challenge conventional methods in our approach to managing, investing, and preserving wealth. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
A good retirement plan is about income. How much money you've saved is not as important as how much income you're going to have. A sound income plan should take into account the timing of your Social Security distribution. If you're taking a pension, did you take a survivor option and why? When you're taking your required minimum distributions from your IRAs at 70.5, are they coming from growth? Are they coming from dividends and interest? Because that could be a disaster if it's coming from growth. Timing when to start each stream of income is just as important as the tax implications of each stream of income. If you're looking for an advisor to be more of a partner for you and your spouse in retirement, call Brad Williams Financial Services at 844-343-6048. Call today and schedule a free 1-hour, no obligation consultation to discuss your goals and aspirations and see if we're a good fit. That's 844-343-6048. Imagine your husband of 35 years has just died. The funeral's over, the family's gone home, and now you're left alone. And think about the financial decisions that you've got to make and how pressing they are. We're going to talk about some tips to get you through that. Well, I know this is not the cheeriest of subjects, but one thing about my job as a financial advisor is I've always looked at it as I'm the guy that's got to ask the hard questions and discuss some of the topics that people really don't want to discuss, because these topics affect all of us. Birth, death, retirement. These are things that oftentimes can be emotional, and that each one of them has their own set of hard decisions to make. And today, I'm going to focus on what a widow should do. What kind of tips can I provide a widow that I've learned in my 32 years of experience? Folks, let me preface something up front. When I say widow, I'm also speaking of widowers. A little different set of problems, but mostly the same. It's just how men deal with things maybe emotionally different than women do. But when it comes time to organizing their finances, which is why you listen to this show, very similar. And so we're going to address some of those things today. I've seen many things in 32 years. I've had many clients' spouses die. I've dealt with ex-spouses in that respect, children, and I've been exposed to a lot of different things that people go through during that transition period. And so we're going to break this down piece by piece and take a look at each one and try to provide a framework for you of the things you need to be asking yourself if this applies to you, or maybe a family member. This could be a show that you might want to send to a family member who's going through this. But I guess the most pressing issue is that you have now got to make a bunch of decisions that most likely prior to this you made as a couple. Maybe one of you, had more of a say in things than the other, but it really doesn't matter. Now it's all on you. It's all on your shoulders. So the best piece of advice I would say is, since that period following your spouse's death or significant other may be the most stressful that you've ever experienced, you want to avoid making hasty decisions, especially major financial decisions, because in all sincerity, your judgment may be compromised. So what we're going to address first is those things that need to be addressed right away. And then we're going to transition into those things that you'll need to address in time, and having a set process. So we're going to get started right away. Probably, the number one thing would be really handling the death claim, getting the death certificates. Those are real important. You're going to find that as you're transitioning a lot of those accounts over, that you're going to need those documents. So get a bunch of them. Again, we're not talking about a bright and cheery subject today. We're talking about a loss. But we need to make this transition for you as easy as it can possibly be, to where you're not falling into a bunch of financial pitfalls and traps. And so that's the biggest thing, is when you go get the death certificate, get a bunch of them, because you will most likely need them in time. The next thing we're going to talk about when we come back is the types of documents that you need to be thinking about.
If you've missed any of today's program, or you'd need more information, we're here for you 24/7 online. Visit AskBradshow.com. That's AskBradshow.com. Thanks for listening to our show today. In retirement, you only get one chance to get it right, and we know that proper information leads to informed decisions. And that's why we hold free informational workshops in our area every month. Topics like Social Security, RMDs, the latest retirement tax strategies, IRAs, estate planning, and so much more. For dates and times of the next free workshop in your area, just pick up the phone. Give us a call today. 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Or visit us online at AskBradshow.com. That's AskBradshow.com.
All right, as I mentioned when we got started, the best advice I could give you is take it slow. Don't make any major financial decisions until you've had time to really settle in, and don't make any really major ones for 6 to 12 months afterwards. So One of the things that's going to be important is getting your documents together and Social Security numbers. If you've got will, power of attorney, start getting those together. Go ahead and put your tax returns for the last 5 years together. This is a time to start thinking about employee benefits. So try to grab all you can on if your spouse is still employed when they died or if they're getting benefits after the fact so that you can see what they're getting if you weren't directly involved in that when they were alive. Because often what I've seen is there's usually one spouse that handles the bookkeeping or the record keeping and the investing and the paying of the bills. And so when that person's gone, the other one's really in the dark. So getting all your statements together, checking, savings, brokerage, mutual fund, retirement accounts, these type of things. Any stock certificates, although, mostly now things are digital and they're not certificates, but plenty of people still have some stock certificates. If you own your vehicles, get the car titles ready because you'll need to do some work with them. So really putting together all the documents is probably the first step. Second step would be trying to figure out who your team is. Do you have an attorney that worked with you on the will? Go ahead and contact them and set an appointment to have a preliminary meeting with them to begin to discuss the process. If you have an accountant, notify them and let them know what's coming so they can help you get prepared. If you've got a financial advisor, then a meeting needs to be done with them. And it might even be helpful if they knew who each other were so they could communicate. So assembling a team is real important. Now, oftentimes what happens is one spouse handled it. Maybe they use their own particular broker or they're not in the picture anymore. And the surviving spouse maybe doesn't have a relationship with them. So whatever happens when you meet with them, just make sure that you make it clear that you're not going to make any major financial decisions right away so that they can take off the salesperson hat and put on the counselor hat, so to speak. And it's interesting, as a financial advisor, I've found that after 32 years, oftentimes I'm a marriage counselor, a family counselor, and in many cases, in my experience, a grief counselor for situations like this. Make sure to, again, get your documents together as much as you can. Keep a list, maybe even keep a little notebook handy by your bedside or whatever. And every time you think of a potential account that you need a statement for, write that down so that you've got a record and a running tally. And then maybe keep a record of when you've fulfilled that, when you've gotten that document and have it ready. The next thing I would talk about is give it a little time before you close out and retitle some accounts. Because, for example, a checking account, you may be getting some checks later on paid to your husband for certain things they had. And I'm assuming that, the widow is the survivor. No offense to you men out there, and you may need to deposit that check. I had an instance with someone referred to me by my attorney that had a policy through Aflac, through work, that was an accident policy that paid out, but they had already settled the estate and the check was only I think it was like $5,000. They're going to have to spend about $2,500 to reopen everything and get that reprobated because the bank wouldn't cash the check because the account had already been closed. So make sure you take your time before you start closing and retitling everything to make sure you don't get caught with any loose ends. Now, I know I'm beginning to cover a lot and there is a lot involved. What I'd like to make an offer to my listeners is I work with my clients in handling this and I use what I call a beneficiary directory, which I find helpful. It's a way to catalog the things I'm telling you to catalog. I'll be happy to provide for the first 5 callers this week a free beneficiary directory. It's like a $40 value. And all you got to do is call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. There's no cost. There's no obligation. You don't have to come in to meet me with that. If you're dealing with this type of situation, we'll be happy to provide that to you with no obligation and no cost. That's 844-343-6048. All right. Now, getting back into it, we've discussed handling the pressing issues, getting the death certificates, getting your documents in order, and these things to do once you've had a spouse die. Assemble your team or what you have of a team, and be slow to bring another team member in that's not already there. If they come recommended by somebody you know, that's great. You know, lawyers and accountants are pretty cut and dried. One thing to caution you is that although most everybody in my industry is fine and upstanding and ethical, there are some sharks out there. And, you know, women and men who are in grieving situations can be taken advantage of. So be very, very slow to make any major financial commitments as far as investment changes or anything like that when you're going through the grieving process. Another big thing, pay the bills. If you're not the bill payer, get right in there. You want to make sure those things stay on time. And hopefully you will have done some joint accounts and things like that so that the surviving spouse will have a credit. I have seen from time to time where, you know, you had a stay-at-home spouse and the working spouse had everything run through their Social Security number and they had great credit and the spouse had very little or no credit. And it wasn't that they were a bad risk. It's just that the other spouse did everything. So for those who aren't dealing with this, who are listening, make sure you're starting to develop credit on your own if you don't already have that. I think the next thing is family. You know, you got a lot of grief situations to deal with the family, settling up things. I've told many times that prior to my mother's death, she created a lottery system for when she was gone because we knew she was dying. And, you know, she had a lot of antiques and things like that. And instead of creating a family squabble, we all just sat down one evening and drew lots and we each took turns picking. And believe it or not, folks, the expensive, valuable stuff wasn't the first to be picked. It was typically the emotional, the things we had, memories and things with my mother. So have some kind of system for that, because what you don't want is all of a sudden everybody coming in there and, you know, cleaning the place out. I've known people that, you know, had one family member that lived near their dying family member and come and raided everything. And sometimes kids can put pressure on a survivor to let them have stuff, but just take your time, get your family in check. Another thing is you need to be able to say no. You may have some family members that know you've come into life insurance or investments, and you just need to be able to say, you know, if they ask you for something, just say, I need to take some time to get a handle on everything before I make any of those kind of decisions. Why don't you come back to me in the future and we can talk about it? Because I've seen it. I've seen where, you know, you've got a surviving spouse where the dying spouse left plenty for that surviving spouse, but you have a child that maybe has drug problems or some other kind of problems, or maybe they're just, you know, a mooch. I mean, to be quite frank, hate to use a word like that. They know mom or dad is coming to a lot of money and they start hitting them up for it. And they're already grieving as it is. You don't want those kind of decisions. You used to be able to say no. And if you need a family member to help you, enlist their help. But that's really, really critical. Again, I mentioned the documents. Have a way to organize them. And as I mentioned before, I'm providing a beneficiary directory for the first 5 callers today that'll help with that process. No cost, no obligation, no need to meet with me. This is just a service I want to provide to you if you're going through this. Call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. All right. Now, covered a lot of things, taking care of the pressing issues, not wanting to make any big decisions right off once you've lost your spouse, putting together a team, and things like life insurance. Go ahead and file those claims. Once you get those death certificates, file those claims. Now, what I would suggest, and most insurance companies do that now, is don't have them send you a big check. You don't need to be dealing with a big, multiple 6-figure check right now. A lot of times they'll put it in a money market account, earning interest, give you a checkbook. So if you need some interim money, but that's one of those things you need to wait on until you really get settled in and figure out what your goals are. Contact the employer if they're still employed. You know, if there's any life insurance or benefits there, you know, deal with that. Then you need to start dealing with account holders, brokerage accounts, IRAs, you know, things like this, and start to get the paperwork to begin getting those in your name. And remember, as a spouse, you can roll over the IRA into your account, but you may want to set it up as a beneficiary IRA. That's really your choice. That's something you need to deal with a financial professional on to give you the ins and outs from a tax standpoint. From, if you're below 59 and a half, make sure that you're considering maybe leaving it in the 401k or whatever, or keeping it as a beneficiary, because on an inherited IRA like that, you're not hit with the 10% early withdrawal penalty if you need the money before you're 59 and a half. So those are some of the considerations that need to be made when you're taking care of these things. Your home title, your auto registration. These are the things that need to be handled. These are not the urgent things, but they need to be handled. And so you might even set up a hierarchy list of, okay, these are the most important. I'm going to handle these. You're going to feel a lot less stress if you sit down with a trusted advisor or a family member who may have been through this, and, using, of course, the beneficiary directory that I've provided, if that's something you want to use, or something similar, to go through a checklist so that you'll have a lot less stress when you know where you stand in the process. So it's all about reducing stress. VA benefits. They may have a VA death benefit. So make sure you get with the VA. There's burial benefits there. You may want them to have some type of VA funeral type arrangement. So those are things to consider. Social Security. This is a big one. If you're not already taking Social Security, then you have decisions to make. And they're decisions that can be very costly if you make the wrong ones. So sitting down with someone who understands Social Security, and not just every financial advisor does, and looking at, okay, do you file under your spousal benefits? Do you file under widows? What is the best strategy to maximize the money that's been put in there? Because all that money in that account is yours. And if you make the wrong decision, you're just leaving your own money on the table. So again, big decisions have to be made in the Social Security realm at that standpoint. A key thing to look at there is, I personally use a Social Security timing report, which takes into account things like that, and it helps my clients understand the ramifications of those decisions. So keep in mind, you got the Social Security decision that you got to make. Now, another thing that often gets neglected is that being in financial planning and using long-term care for many years, a lot of the older long-term care benefits provided a spousal benefit after 10 years. And what I mean is that as long as the premiums have been paid, let's say you set up a joint benefit or two separate policies but keyed in together, depending on the company, and that after 10 years you've got a survivor benefit. Well, it could be that you still can continue your long-term care insurance, but don't have to pay a premium after that. So look in to see if that's the case. If you've got an agent that's still around that sold that to you, they should be able to answer that question. If they're not, then get with somebody who does. That's an area that I've worked extensively in back through the years. Just get with somebody who knows and can tell you that. It'll be in the policy. It'll be easy to understand.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, we believe in innovative thinking, and we're not afraid to challenge conventional methods in our approach to managing, investing, and preserving wealth. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. If you've missed any of today's program or you'd need more information, we're here for you 24/7 online. Visit AskBradshow.com. That's AskBradshow.com. Thanks for listening to our show today. In retirement, you only get one chance to get it right, and we know that proper information leads to informed decisions. And that's why we hold free informational workshops in our area every month. Topics like Social Security, RMDs, the latest retirement tax strategies, IRAs, estate planning, and so much more. For dates and times of the next free workshop in your area, just pick up the phone. Give us a call today. 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Or visit us online at askbradshow.com. That's askbradshow.com.
All right, now we've covered a lot today, and I know this is not a very cheery subject. I've lost family members, and I've had many clients that lost their spouses, and I've helped them through that process. You know, you got to take your time. You got to be systematic, go through the grieving, but don't let everything fall by the wayside. Set up a process, set up a timetable. And if you'll do that organizational part of it or get help with that, the stress will be reduced because you're not laying awake at night wondering if you've forgotten something. You know, I think there's more sleep lost, not by what we did that day that may have been wrong or whatever, but by what we're wondering we forgot about. And this is one of those cases where being organized is going to pay off significantly in less stress and the fact that you're not going to leave money on the table. And people would be surprised at how many life insurance policies go unclaimed because people didn't know they were there. You got to file a claim to get it. So, you know, if your spouse is sick, start getting with them on that. If there's issues going on where, you know that's coming, go ahead and get with that. In fact, you know, if you're listening to this thinking that this broadcast might help somebody you love, think about it for yourself too. Begin organizing. One of the things about a financial advisor too is that even if you love doing the investments yourself and you're what I call a do-it-yourselfer, it's often good as you start getting older to start merging a financial advisor in the process so that they'll be there to take over when you're not, if your spouse is not inclined to deal with those things. Gives you time to evaluate them, make sure they're trustworthy to be able to handle things when you're gone. Because I think in financial advice, that's the biggest thing is, are they trustworthy? So, you know, we covered a lot of getting the list, getting the accounts together, getting your death certificates. And again, the biggest thing is don't make any decisions in the 6 to 12 months. Some people, you know, go through the grieving process quicker than others. But for 6 to 12 months, just let everything kind of coast. Now, what I mean by that is those cash benefits and things like that. You're going to need to adjust your investment process if you've got an advisor and maybe de-risk a little bit, whatever. It just depends. You don't need to just forget about your investments, but you need to not make any major changes if it's not warranted. And there should be a valid reason for that. So, you know, there is a process. And again, I'd like to make an offer for those who are going through this or maybe getting ready to go through this. For the first 5 callers, I'd like to give them the directory I use to help my clients in this aspect, which is called the beneficiary directory. That's a $40 value, and I will provide it to you free, no obligation. Just call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048, and we'll get that to you. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, I know this is not, you know, the brightest of subject, but it's business. And, you know, just like milestones in our life happen, this is one of those we can't avoid. So be prepared. If it's happened, then get organized, get some help, and it'll make the process a lot easier. Then you can deal with your grief and your loss and not be worried about finances. So I hope this was beneficial, and you have a great week.
That's all the time we have for today. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
Investment advisory services offered through Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisory firm. Brad Williams Financial Services and Sound Income Strategies, LLC are not associated entities.